So the topic today is the auxiliary uniform. And we're going to briefly talk about uniform standards, types of uniforms, the now required annual uniform inspection, some changes to the uniforms that have been promulgated. We'll briefly talk about the upcoming Coast Guard utility uniform. I'm briefly going to mention the auxiliary work uniform, and there's some issues about that, and then grooming standards associated with when we're wearing the uniform. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. All this information and documentation is available through Coast Guard uniform regulation, auxiliary manual, and then the AWLOCS reports. Sorry, I had a mosquito in my ear. The AWLOCS presentations or documents that were sent out this year was some new ones. So the first thing, as the division commander noted earlier, was that when we're in uniform, we are all doing public affairs work. We are representing not only the auxiliary, but the United States Coast Guard. So therefore, when we're in uniform, we need to be properly uniformed, and we need to be properly groomed, and we need to wear the uniform properly and correctly. Wear your uniform with pride. You are a representative of the Coast Guard and the auxiliary. As elected officers and appointed officers, we are expected to set the example. Your human resources staff can assist with uniform questions, and I'm going to mention this later, but each flotilla should have a uniform expert that can assist, whether it's your HR officer or your flotilla commander, your vice flotilla commander. Someone in the flotilla needs to be a uniform expert, needs to understand the regulations, and can assist the members to be properly uniformed in whatever uniform they are wearing for those activities. Those uniform standards are established by the Coast Guard, by the Commandant, Commandant Instruction, Mike 1020.6 series. That is the standard. The auxiliary has some modifications to that through Commandant Instruction, Mike 16790.1 series. That's the auxiliary manual, which has been updated this year with some of the changes. And of course, the uniform board announcements, which come out through the ALCOS and AWLOCS messages. All of that information is on the auxiliary website, CDAUX. If you don't have a copy of those, I strongly recommend you get them and review them. Uniform regulations change constantly. The likely first uniforms an auxiliary should have, depending on what roles they have, are the ODU and the tropical blue. However, those are not necessarily required uniforms, but it depends on what activity they are engaged in as to what uniform they need to have and should be wearing. There are, of course, always exceptions and options. For instance, as a vessel examiner, there is a vessel examiner alternate uniform with the vessel examiner shirt and the ODU pant. There's a boat shoe that they can also wear for those evolutions. Again, all this information is in the manuals. As your new members come on board, whether they're prior service or if this is the first time ever putting on a uniform, they need to be instructed about the proper uniform, because what the Marines do and the Navy does and the Air Force does and so on and so forth is somewhat different than what the Coast Guard does. Although in general, if you have prior service experience, most of the rules all apply. There's some variations, but it's a fairly easy transition. But again, talk to your newbies, get them instructed properly. And I don't think it's a bad thing to do it for existing and even long-term members, because as I mentioned, regulations change. And with COVID, we've been out of uniform for a couple of years, some folks. So it's a good time for do a refresher. There are only 2 authorized sources for uniform: Coast Guard Exchange and the Aux Center. Amazon, Walmart, commercial retailers are not a source. eBay is not a source. The only 2 authorized uniform purchase places are the Exchange and the Aux Center. I had a member recently who mentioned that they bought uniform parts on Amazon, and I said, then you can either return them or put them in the closet. I don't want to see you wearing them because they're not official uniforms. It is strongly recommended that the auxiliary lead, whether it's flotilla commander or the activity, establish a written uniform of the day in advance of an event or activity. So that you can have a standing uniform. So for instance, you can say as flotilla commander, your standing uniform of the day for flotilla meetings is TROPS or ODUs if you go to the station. Obviously the VE has an established one. PV has an established one, which is TROPS. If it's a public affairs event, depending on what it is, and it depends on the uniform that would be appropriate. But uniform means uniformity, means everybody's supposed to wear the same thing and look the same. There are, a number of different uniforms that members can own and wear based off of their qualifications and, and the event, whether it's the service dress blue, which is the suit jacket with sleeve lace, and or the tropical blue, like we mentioned. There's a winter dress blue that we don't wear here, but a few people do have it. It is authorized during certain times of the year. Of course, the operational dress uniform and the variations that are allowed for the auxiliary. Recently, with this year, there was an annual requirement that was established for auxiliaries to undergo a uniform inspection by the elected officer in their chain of leadership. I have not seen that well promulgated throughout. However, it is in the regs that were promulgated. It's just kind of buried. There is not a place in Aux data to record that as of yet, nor is there a form that I have seen. So I'm thinking that that's one of those things where they put the regulation out, but they just haven't come up with the administrative aspect. It is recommended that you go ahead and probably start doing that. One of the notations is that an auxiliarist may wear any uniform that they are qualified to wear for the inspection. So if an auxiliarist does not own a uniform, then they can wear the blue blazer outfit, which is an authorized component. Then if they don't have that either, then they're not required to have an inspection. However, if they don't have a uniform, they cannot perform those in-person activities, which require a uniform. The annual inspection will count as a currency maintenance task for all competencies. That's pretty self-explanatory, and that was made effective for calendar year 2022. It would put you in REYR, just like performing a number of vessel exams or program visits. It's a competency requirement. Correct. Doesn't mean that we probably shouldn't go ahead and start doing it, and then we can have it written down. And then as soon as they make that notation in the system, we can do it. ODU tucked version. No one here is wearing one, so it's not an issue for y'all, but it is no longer authorized as of December 31 past. If any auxiliarist is still wearing that, please advise them that those need to be discarded properly. The new Coast Guard utility uniform, known as CG-U, becomes available in fiscal year 2024 or possibly later. And the current ODU will be phased out 2 years post availability. So 2 years post whatever date. I suspect it'll be probably December 31 post whatever date. As for now, this is the only working uniform that is authorized in the, there are some prototypes out. That is not yet authorized to be worn. As with the auxiliary work uniform, a lot of folks have probably seen that. There was a pilot program that was going on in 2 parts of the country, 2 districts. We were not part of that, but that was scheduled to become available this year. However, as of right now, it is the 511 pants are actually already on Coast Guard Exchange, as well as Aux Center has some of the components already. However, the full uniform and the full regs have not been promulgated to this date. Should it become available, it will be an alternative work uniform to the ODU in place of the CGU for auxiliarists to be able to wear that. What is going to happen is that Coast Guard is no longer going to have produced the ODU/CGU in non-standard sizes. So if an auxiliarist cannot meet Coast Guard sizing requirements or grooming requirements, then they will have the option to wear that, should that completely be implemented. As of right now, it's not fully implemented. Just be cognizant. The requirement for ODU trouser with the USCG embroidered emblem on the pockets has been removed. So they are no longer on the pockets on the new ones. If you have old ones, they're still authorized. Wear them until they're no longer serviceable. The requirement for USCG auxiliary lettering on the ODU t-shirt has been removed. You can now wear a plain blue t-shirt. You can continue to wear those stenciled until they're no longer serviceable. What that means is that, and what I was going through and reading the regulations, the ODU blouse is not to be removed except for heat situations where you need to take a rest. And when you're in the public, you're supposed to be fully dressed, and no longer can you wear a ODU without the blouse on. I know that a couple of years ago, that was an issue where they could do that. And I think there are some different things going on with that, but in our climate, we need another option. This is some very heavy material for our climate. Maybe up north, they don't know that, but down here, we definitely feel it. So the ODU blouse is authorized to be worn with sleeves up or down based on individual preference, unless the lead or the order issuing authority determines that they should be one way or the other. That means if you're working in an office environment, you can wear them down. If it's, air conditioned, it's cold. Obviously here, I think wear them up is a good idea. Boonie cap, AKA the Tilly, is authorized for wear while conducting operations in adverse environmental conditions, unless your OIA or lead determines that uniformity is required. The Boonie cap is only authorized for wear with the ODU and the future auxiliary work uniform. Same with the knit watch cap. Same applies to that. The knit watch cap does not have any emblems on it. It's plain. It's the same as the Navy watch cap. It's the exact same. Nice wool, keeps you warm. Removal of the boat shoe from the Coast Guard Distribution Center. The Uniform Distribution Center, AKA the Exchange. I don't know if y'all noticed, but the Exchange and the Uniform Distribution Center have now merged. They're not separate anymore. Exchange now handles all uniform distribution. So the boat shoes have been removed, and you can buy those on the market. They just have to meet the standard. and they are still authorized. Mostly, this probably mostly applies for folks on surface patrols, but you're allowed to use eyewear retainers for either prescription glasses or sunglasses. They need to be black or blue, and they're only to be worn with ODU, the auxiliary work uniform when promulgated, and tropical blue and the winter dress blue uniforms in a work environment. Very quickly, there is a female maternity uniform update that expands the operational dress uniform to have a postpartum nursing t-shirt. Probably doesn't affect most auxiliarists, but just be aware of that. Women now have the option of wearing flats with the skirt or slacks for trops and service blue. There is now a tropical blue long sleeve shirt. There was one previously. It kind of went through some morphs and now it's back. It is now an authorized version of tropical blue. So it's tropical blue long. It's the TBLS. This is authorized for year-round wear, specifically for office environments where the air conditioning may be really intense and folks want a little bit more warmth. It's the same type of material as the Trops short sleeve, but it is worn with a four-in-hand tie, and it requires also now, if you're wearing a tie, you also need to have a tie bar or tack. And then the females have to wear the blue tie tab. There's a name tag over your right pocket. There are no ribbons worn with that, although you are allowed one insignia above each pocket, so you can wear your OXOP badge, and if you have a qualification badge, you can wear that, and then one on each pocket. Different. I did have a picture of what that looks like. This actually came from active duty side, but it applies to y'all too. And I know you all can't see that. But
You have collar devices?
no collar devices, shoulder boards. As I previously mentioned, the CGU will become available in fiscal year 24. At some point, they don't give a specific date, so that's not yet known, and there will be a 24-month phase out. The auxiliary will be authorized to wear that. There will be a slight variation to it. Instead of the dark blue name and service tabs, they're going to be a light gray. And the print on them, instead of being like these are white, they will be the dark blue. There will be on the right shoulder, there will be an in color American flag patch reverse. And then on the left shoulder, there will be the auxiliary patch, which is the one that's worn by aviators on their flight suits. It'll be the same one. There will be dark blue trousers. I don't know if they're going to be the exact same ODU pants or not. That was not specific, but you wear the same rigger's belt and boots. There are some also other allowed footwear, and then the authorized baseball cap. And I'm going to make the assumption that the Tilley hat will also be authorized for operations. I'm not going to talk about the auxiliary work uniform at this time, as they're still going through some decisions on that. Just know that that may be coming out, and if it does, we need to be prepared to allow for its use. Grooming standards are going to be tightened up now. In the past, I think there was a little more leniency, but because we are wearing a Coast Guard uniform, we are expected to meet Coast Guard standards. As I previously mentioned, auxiliaries will be required when in a Coast Guard uniform to conform to size, grooming, and appearance standards. So it means properly groomed with the hair. They are still, from what I read, they're still going to allow facial hair. However, the OIAs can restrict that and require clean shaven. Mustaches will be allowed. They have to be properly trimmed. What is more strictly required is hair grooming. And they want gentlemen to be properly groomed with your hair, means off the ears, off the collar, and not a big mess, hair not in your eyes. I think everybody here meets that requirement, but there, you may have some auxiliaries that don't, so.
Can we talk later?
That's okay.
Okay.
They're gonna,
Okay, somebody is missing all of his hair. What happened to it?
are they gonna restrict the glare?
There were some changes to the female hair standards. Ladies have an increase in the bun size. They now allow up to 4 inches of bulk in the bun, and it can now come down to the collar, but it cannot project below the collar. They're also allowing ponytails, but the ponytail again has to be off the shirt. They're allowing now hair braids, cornrows, locks, and twists. So they really kind of allow for some additional hair options for the ladies.
About dreadlocks.
That was not listed. They just say locks, so I'm going to assume that could potentially be dreadlocks. They do also allow ladies to use the hair claw. So if there are any ladies in your flotillas that applies to, you can provide that information to them. With that, that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions?
Just one.
Yes, sir.
In reading that several times, unless I could have had a brain cramp at the moment, but isn't there a defined difference between the boonie hat and the tilly?
I did not read that. They seem to use that term interchangeably.
Actually, because if you order.
Or the person who invented it.
Comes from the hat that they call a tilly hat comes from the Ox Association. Basically looks like a hat that you can snap both sides, very wide brim. But the quote unquote boonie that you get from exchange, it's a very similar to a special ops hat. The guys where they're floppy, they're very loose and movable.
Right.
Yeah, it's a shorter brim.
The only
Just
thing I
curious.
know is that there are only 2 sources to acquire it, because they do have to be stenciled with just like our ball caps that they have same
Okay.
stenciling on there. So it says U.S. Coast Guard auxiliary as the only specific requirement, and it has to be in blue, and those are the only 2 sources you can get it. So
The boonie hat that's available through the exchange does not have any embroidery at all. It's solid blue, just like that.
I have one flotilla member that I know of that wears one, and his has stenciling.
I'm sure you can get it stenciled for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
Just one comment.
Yes, sir.
When you were talking about the new work uniform, it has not been recommended from the district level to purchase that yet, as that's in, I think District 1 is,
Right?
yeah.
Oh, north, 8
Yeah.
north or something. 1
Yeah.
north and 8.
Yeah, so, but it's not, doesn't look likely right now. I think some of the feedback is not good. So it's not being promoted right now as a buy item. If you were looking at it like a stock, whether buy or hold.
There was one other question I had. Only from looking as far as sources, when you mentioned about Amazon and eBay scenario, there are legitimate places on eBay. There's eBay store is selling stuff from the Ox Association. It is available. What do you do about that? Can you not patronize that at all?
Correct. The instructions and the regulations are that there are only 2 authorized sources to purchase from, and that is Ox Center and the exchange. Any of the exchanges. So some parts are interchangeable with different services, boots, obviously. And in some of the service dress uniforms, like the mess jackets and stuff, those are Navy mess jackets. So those are obviously, you can purchase those at the Navy exchange.
Roger that.
That's the same as the Navy uniform. What about the coveralls?
Coveralls are limited to specific uses. And if you're doing the commercial exam at the port, and those are authorized, but that would be up to the lead
Mhm.
as to whether or not you wear those, but that would be an appropriate uniform. I actually have a pair of coveralls, but I don't use them often.
Yeah, I have several pairs that were issued to me.
They're still authorized. Yes, sir.
The polo shirts that we have been able to use with the long ODU pants and so on, and baseball cap, are they still authorized? And the name tag and the USCG option on the set?
As of right now, the vessel examiner polo shirt is the only one that is authorized. And that does not have a name on it. It only says vessel examiner.
The operations polo is no longer.
I haven't seen any regulations on that one specifically.
I'll ask for clarification on that from district.
Right. Now, that may be for the hot weather, if you're talking about the
Yeah.
hot weather
Yeah, the
uniform.
hot weather.
Okay,
Not with the shorts though. I mean,
Right.
well, with the shorts, we have one with the long ODU.
right. I did not explore that in depth. We don't use it. My coxswain does not authorize that typically. I don't think anybody in our flotilla has that, so. But that's typically by up to your flotilla.
If there's anything, I'll find out if there's a conclusion. I hope not.
It is still, from what I read, it's still authorized. I know there's some variation, and from what I read, this new auxiliary work uniform is basically the same as the hot weather uniform. Right. So, and maybe they can make some clarification and just merge the two concepts. It'll be easier, less uniforms to buy.
Yeah.
Anything else? There's nothing else? Thank you very much for presentation. At
Thank
this
you.
point, we are concluding with training, and it is now time for the fourth cornerstone of Auxiliary Life Fellowship. Thanks for everybody, and have a good weekend.